Look at what the stories are
Right.
on the front page, and we're being told that there's now a rush for biometric health insurance cards, but also just because some few days ago, well, the National Insurance Identification Authority said they were now going to do re-registration of cards, card holders, and they just also wanted to do an update of what had already been done. Looking at what the exercise has been so far, the difficulties that those who had registered have gone through are still going through. Is the new directive the best or the most prudent action to take? Seth?
Right. I still have a couple of issues when it comes to the re-registration exercise. Reasons are that, remember ourselves, in 2012, just around the same time it happened, and people were of great concern in that we're going to go into a major electioneering exercise. And one of the reasons for having getting yourself on the register was at least having an ID as a Ghanaian. And one of the qualifications, as the law has specified, is the health insurance cards. And we believed, and I don't need to belabor this point, that it was being misused at the time, because if you looked at our borders, major border towns were where this exercise was going on increasingly, and it was a source of worry. We don't need to discriminate amongst ourselves as Ghanaians, but we have to ensure that the right things are done. Mind you, in a couple of months, again, we're going to have another exercise, what we may call the midterm elections. We're going to have assembly elections. Why and how do we just oppose some of these things? We need to really get it properly done. We are the same people. Why is it that at certain off-season, it is not seen, and then when another exercise is coming up, then it's hardly seen? We are aware that the EC is organizing itself for these elections and making recruitment and all of that. Some of these things need to be done devoid of mention that people would want to take undue advantage over other competitors. I don't think it is something we need to encourage.
Now, especially when the president had said that perhaps we need to have an amalgamation of all these identification card authorities or institutions. So, i.e., we have the National Health Insurance Authority cards, we have perhaps also for the passports and also the national identification cards. Then it's become more prudent for us to have one single database for which we can have a lot more access.
I think that is more the reason why we're putting up a national data center, which is just very close to Parliament. And it is rightful so. We have said this in Parliament, that the duplications are many and it's not helpful. You have a driver's license, which is a biometric. We have a voter registration, which is a biometric. We're having health insurance, which is going to be a biometric. I mean, we have a national ID, which is also a biometric. At least we could synchronize them. But there are some of them you cannot necessarily put all together. But once we have a data bank where you can access information on every person, it is advisable. For instance, a driver's license, I don't think you can sync it with the national ID, but you could make passport, which is a traveling document, an option, because you don't necessarily have to always flash your passport as an ID everywhere in Ghana. It is just an ID that enables you cross your border, get into a different environment to be identified as an origin of this country. And in that vein, I really fully support it. That is a matter which is already on the table, but we are hoping that the institutions would have, you see, it's about protecting turfs. That is how some of us see it. Some of these agencies believe they're so jealous of their turfs. And then for us, it is the good of the country. Why must we spend so much money for one agency to set up a whole system of biometric registration, whereas we are using the same country, the same data, the same people, and then can't they sit and then synchronize and help us move forward? I think that is it's a very useful suggestion, which has been on the table for a long time. I'm not surprised the president is also championing it now today, that the buck stops with him. And so we should look at it as a country, because at the end of the day, the cost comes back to us as a people. Your taxes, my taxes, is what is spent in projecting some of these fine programs. And so for success in these projects, let us see how best we can allow some prudence, so that it is not necessarily seen as one person sitting somewhere doing his thing in his corner, another sitting in another area doing his corner. So we can all put all hands on deck and help Mother Ghana grow.
Crucially, if we have one stop database, how is that an advantage for us, whether for transactions or for any other activity?
First and foremost, crime will reduce, because, for instance, if they have my finger data, wherever that bank is, whichever agency is assessing it, since it's centralized, you can all pool. It's just like sitting in an office which is networked and all operations are centralized, and you are using a common printer. If you press a button on your desk, it goes to the printer and then you have it. Same way, if you have a data bank sitting there for all of us, you may be sitting in your office here and then you can just walk into your server. Once you can have access to it, the gateway, you can draw information out of it and it will help you. It is a common source of information for all agencies, not necessarily security alone, even in medics, so that a person who is forwarding an identity as a health attendant and is not having the requisite data and impersonation, all these things will help us reduce some of these crime or threats which do not enable growth and development of our system. So for some of us, I believe it is high time we got those things. I mean, how would a person be arrested at an immigration point when he's entering another jurisdiction? Similarly, that is how to do it, because once they have your data. I mean, bio data you can't rob off. It is your bio data. And each and every person, as how God created us, have a unique bio data. And so that is the modern way. Technology have helped society, have helped the world to improve upon data gathering.
If we take a look at it currently, perhaps we started some years ago the identification system. If we had continuously perhaps also consolidated what was being done there, could we have progressed more forcefully than we have?
A lot of us believed that the exercise of the national identification was going to be strengthened, because if we had focused in strengthening that, once it's been there for long, I mean, and it's a worry to some of us, because if you look at how long they have been available and how far they have come, and yet they still have bottlenecks. Bottom line, when you meet with them in committees and they are expressing the challenges, it comes down back to the normal mantra everybody talks about: money, financing. And it is sad, because if we are successful in the national ID project, I'm sure they would have had all data, and it was going to be repetitive, something which was going to be ongoing, and it wasn't going to stop, because once a child is born and attains certain criteria, because it was backed by law, they would have their IDs, and then we would then develop thereafter. And I believe that using that ID alone is more enough an ID for any person to walk to any polling station on any day to exercise their franchise, because that signifies and identifies you as an individual and an origin of the land. And it's so unique. So for me, the national ID must be strengthened, and we must ensure that we have the national ID, which nobody can duplicate. But in this era where we still have, because it is not fully fledged, we still have maybe the Electoral Commission going to go ahead to do its own bio data gathering, and then one of the requirements by the law is this matter we raised earlier of the National Health ID, which qualifies you to go in and have yourself registered if you don't have a passport, because it is seen as one of the IDs of the land, just as somebody holding a driver's license. It will stop all these duplications and worries, because somebody, I may believe that it is not a worry, but it is a worry for another person. Must we worry our heads to spend energies discussing this, having this conversation this morning. We should be focusing on how to get some bread and butter for our people, because that's what everybody is looking up to do.
Anyway, so the subject of national identification. Now they say they want to do the re-registration, if not an update, so to speak, of...
But the National Identification Office must be up and doing. I got registered way before I got into Parliament, because my region was one of the regions that started registration early, and I know that most of the people haven't received their cards. I'm in Parliament. Because of that, I refused to duplicate my registration when I got into Parliament, and they came into Parliament to register us. I did not go in there for it. I'm sure by now my card should be ready and it's sitting somewhere, but it's still same old communication matter. How effectively are we communicating amongst ourselves? How are we centralizing collection processes? We need to do a bit more sensitization so that people know that yes, the cards are available, they are ready, you can come for them. And it is worth, because I have a passport, I have a driver's license, I have a national insurance card, I have several IDs, so I'm not perturbed that everywhere or wherever I go and an ID is requested of me, I can immediately generate one. So I'm not perturbed. But how about others who do not have what I have? How would they go about it? So it is important, and it is very much urgent on the part of the National Identification Authority to move ahead and be more proactive and get citizenry to appreciate the good work they are doing. Because some who do not know will sit back and tell you that you are doing nothing, and it will not be their fault because they don't know.
Okay, now let's take a look at concretely what the way forward should be for whether the policy on the subject itself, but also the institution.
No, to save the country. I mean, today we are all talking about how our economy is the volatility of our economy. And so any prudent measure which will save, make us some savings, cost-cutting measures, we have to employ them. Why must we? If we have to invest a lot of money in ensuring that we have all our nationals on a data bank at the National Identification Authority, let us do that. And then we'll stop all these issues, side issues of EC doing her own process, DVLA doing her own process, the National Health Insurance doing her own process, go back to payee systems. Employment is also doing their own data build-up, bio-registration. All these duplications must cease, because the country hasn't got enough money. We don't have such money to spend on all these exercises. The duplication must cease, and so there must be a clear-cut policy that this is the way forward, and this is the way we have to do it, and we just get it done.
Okay, so we have to move forward on the subject.